Hey guys, it's been a long time since I've done a video like this, just sitting down face to face with the camera. Although, yeah, I've still got my shades on. I'm gonna leave those on. But there was so much that had to be said this time. I had to write it all down, so I'm gonna be reading off a screen. I know that's not exactly great to do, for videos. I think people say don't do that. I have to. Plus I stutter a lot, and if I have the words right there and I'm reading off it, that might lessen that a bit. Hopefully you'll be able to watch to the end because this is super important. Okay, this is going to go in the political section of my videos. It's not really about organized stalking. I mean, part of it, yeah, it's all linked together, but that's not the main issue. It's just one of many issues. Okay, anyway, here we go. Back in 1930s, 1940s Germany, the Nazi Party wanted more land, more space for a growing Aryan race. Their intent was to conquer the surrounding nations and force survivors into a single unified people under German rule. But in order to achieve this, Hitler and his cronies, and I'm going to call him Hitler, okay? Hitler and his cronies would need an excuse to invade surrounding nations. Their excuse? Well, to simplify, they came up with a list of people that they deemed bad, and then they claimed that those people were living in those surrounding nations. Based on this newly created enemy from all sides, they justified their invasions of other free and sovereign nations. History is repeating itself. Now, Trump has claimed that he seeks to invade Mexico. So much for the desire to prevent war, right? Isn't it something that when Russia invades Ukraine, commits both genocide and cultural genocide against the Ukrainian people, the Republican Party demands that we not get involved? Or worse, that we do get involved, but only enough to keep the peace by forcing Ukraine to back down and give Putin what he wants. If we fail to comply, they claim that we are the ones creating war. What logic is that? I mean, they invade another nation, commit genocide, cultural genocide, and worse, in an attempt to conquer the people of that sovereign territory. And then they claim that if those people don't just lie down and take it, they're the ones creating war. And if other nations refuse to allow it, we're the ones creating war. What twisted logic is this? And yet, this is what the Republicans say about anyone who refuses to support Putin's conquest of Eastern Europe and genocide of numerous groups of people, right? If we don't just let Putin do what he wants, we're the warmongers. We all know he will not stop at the borders of Ukraine. And he already has a stronghold on certain other Eastern European nations. And now that he has even claimed that certain parts of Alaska rightfully belong to Russia, we're about to be screwed, right? Because from there, it's going to be the entire U.S. And he's already having his hired cronies infiltrate and destroy the U.S. from within. By the time the ground war starts, we will be so disempowered as a nation that fighting back will seem almost impossible. And they are planning a ground war on U.S. soil, right? They simply need an excuse to do it. The GOP is a Russian asset now, and Russia, at least on the European continent, appears to be enacting Hitler's old plan, right? Putin wants full reign. He wants to conquer the other nations and collect everyone under Russia, right? But we're the warmongers if we don't just lie down and let Russia commit this mass genocide and cultural genocide, right? Wiping out people and cultures, obliterating yet more pieces of the human puzzle lost to war and conquest, so that humanity again and again loses part of its history. Then it's gone forever. Unless people are able to hide parts of their history, take books and everything that the conquerors are trying to wipe out and hide them, right? All of this, though, we're the ones who are being called warmongers for trying to stop that. And yet, when the fascists in the U.S. want more territory, they're more than ready to wage war. Suddenly, there's an excuse to attack a sovereign nation, right? In the case of Mexico, the excuse is the drug cartel. Now, don't get me wrong, I also want the cartels to be stopped. But invading Mexico or shooting missiles into Mexico, as Trump once said, or putting boots on the ground, okay, starting a war with Mexico, I thought we were trying to avoid war. In the end, this threat against Mexico is not really about drug cartels. The fascists needed an excuse to invade and conquer the territory of another country. And this is the excuse. Heads up, Canada. When Trudeau was visiting Trump in Florida to explain, how tariffs work, because your president had to explain that to our president, Trump joked about Canada joining the U.S. as the 51st state. So, there's even a picture of Trump going around of Trump standing boastfully in front of the Canadian flag. Guys, he wasn't joking, okay? I need you to understand this. Okay? This is an intended conquest of the U.S. and all surrounding areas, okay? They will find an excuse to justify invading, destroying, conquering, and taking over. But Trump is just a puppet. He's working for another power. We know that Putin wants to take down the West, just as he is conquering and destroying Eastern European nations around Russia. But even still, there is another group behind this. Sadly, I can't speak about that here. I mean, I could, but I would be risking even more right now. And right now, I'll be lucky if even this video can stay up the way it is. But I think we all know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. Trump recently threatened that there will be hell to pay in the Middle East if the Israeli hostages were not released. So I guess in some cases it's okay to not just lie down and die in order to keep the peace. Especially in this case, the conservatives were shouting warmonger, at anyone who suggested we defend Ukraine, and now they're boasting about how Trump isn't afraid of war when it comes to this particular case. So, you see how the narrative changes when the people being attacked or defended change? Anyway, before I go on, I want to reinforce to everyone watching this video that the U.S. is now heading toward collapse. And a huge part of that is the restriction on freedom of speech. Trump and his cronies have threatened to persecute and even imprison political opponents. The Christo-fascist conservatives call truth lies and lies truth. They spread lies and claim they speak the truth, while their opponents speak the truth and are called liars. When conservatives claim that they want to stop misinformation from being spread, they're lying. It's the truth they want to stop. It is the truth speakers they intend to silence. Come January 20th, I don't know how long these videos will remain up, and who knows what will happen to those of us who tried to get the truth out. That is why I'm asking people, especially from other countries, to download some of these videos, at least the political section. That way, because the day might come very soon when those of us who in the States who seek to get the truth out will be silenced. And the only information that you're going to hear at that point will be from the liars on the far right. They speak lies and call it truth while calling honest people liars. They project and reverse, accusing others of atrocities that they themselves have committed, right? Or are committing or are planning on committing, or some variation of that, right? They change the meaning of words so that you think they are saying one thing, but they mean something entirely different. For example, when Trump says he's going to get rid of porn, what does he mean by that? Images of cheesy, trashy, poorly made movies and vulgar spread shots probably come to mind. But consider that the conservatives have deemed anything LGBTQ+ related to be pornographic, even if there are no sex acts being depicted. Even books or shows that show two men or two women living a happy married lifestyle or life together are deemed pornographic and banned, though no sex was shown or even spoken of. You can have a happy family with two wives or two husbands having a Christmas party. There's no sex. It's innocent. It's wholesome. It's still going to be called pornographic and banned. So under the anti-porn laws, what do you think is going to happen to the LGBT community in their lives, right? Another point, the conservatives claim that they will get rid of pedophilia, but they have a very different idea of what that means. Christo-fascists are degenerates. They constantly try to lower the legal age of consent and even get rid of it, right? What about sex trafficking? Do you picture a scared, unwilling 12-year-old girl being forced to cross state lines by some adult male who intends to do bad things to her against her will? because that is what most people think of when they hear the term sex trafficking. And yet the conservative Christo-fascists are legalizing that very thing, right? One, by getting rid of the age of consent when it comes to male and female relations, because if there's no age of consent, that limits the ability of the law to prosecute for child sex trafficking, especially if that child was forced into marriage, right? Because statutory rape is a big thing. But if there's no age of consent, well, what happens then, right? But especially if there's, a child who's being married off to an adult male, right? And I say forced because I don't think many 12-year-old girls want to marry 30-year-old men and to live as the men's, broodmare and beast of burden. And these sick monsters don't even call her a child. Unless, of course, a 12-year-old girl claims that she's part of the LGBTQ plus community. Then they'll call her a child and claim she's too young to make decisions like that. Interesting how they will force her to marry, to have sex with an adult male, to go through the trauma and potential death of giving birth, to be a mother, a wife, a servant to her husband. This they have no problem with. All they have to do is use the name of their man-made God, and suddenly whatever a Christo-fascist male wants, he gets, and he justifies as divine. All they have to do is perform a man-made religious marriage ritual, call it God's will, and by doing so, fully legalize what most would consider to be pedophilia and even sex trafficking. So what do Republicans mean when they claim they're going to stop sex trafficking? Do they say, oh, Democrats don't want to stop sex trafficking? Yes, we do. Yes, we do. But Republicans have a very different definition of that, right? Well, they have claimed that parents who take their children across state lines to receive gender-affirming care in another state are actually engaging in sex trafficking, just as they deem anything LGBTQ plus related to be pornographic. This is why so many families with LGBT relatives fled conservative states. They literally moved to blue states because they were being persecuted by conservatives in their own states. And that includes the threat of family separation and even imprisonment for adults who expose minors to anything LGBTQ plus related. Did you all get that? I want you to understand what I just said, right? With exposing minors to anything LGBTQ plus related, comes the threat of parents having their kids taken away from them while the parents are prosecuted for child abuse. And those kids then are taken out of loving homes and put with the actual sex traffickers, who are typically, of the Christian church and conservative. Again, they're not talking about what most people would consider to be abuse. Say, for example, a grown man sexually assaults a young girl, right? No, in a case like that, where it is a male assaulting a female, no matter how young the female, they tend to force the victims to stay in custody of or remain in contact with their abuser. If their abuser, and this is more likely if their abuser is white, Christian, and conservative, right? There are cases where women have reported abuse, tried to get their kids away from the abuser. The courts forced the kids to maintain contact with the abuser, in some cases to stay in the home with the abuser. The abuse continued, and later the women were blamed for not protecting the kids. And the women were charged with the crime for not protecting the kids. Yeah, that insanity actually happens in Republican states, in red states. There was a case some years ago where a teenage girl was raped, became pregnant, had the kid, and when the rapist found out she had his kid, he sued her for joint custody and got it. Then he tried to control the poor girl's entire life, using the child as a means to do it. Right? She fought back, sued for. He then tried to control the poor girl's life, using the child as a means to do it. So he wanted to control the child and therefore control the girl and her family and everyone around that issue. Okay, so they refused, right? And they fought back, and he sued for full custody. The rapist who got her pregnant sued for full custody of the child she had that resulted from the rape, and he got custody. Yeah. The girl was then forced to pay him child support. There was suspicion that he was sexually abusing the child, yes, his own child, to which the legal system did nothing. Nothing was done until the public heard about this case and put pressure on one of the judges to end this madness. Only then was the child removed from his custody and not even placed back with her mother, I don't think. I forget what happened afterward. I think she was placed in another home of some sort. This happened in Louisiana. The police department put in charge of the rape case was supposedly buddy-buddy with the accused. That is why nothing was done about it until the public outrage. So when conservatives claim that they want to remove children from abusive situations, they don't mean what most rational, sane people would assume they mean. Instead, they have deemed gays, lesbians, transgender folks to be perverted, their existence pornographic, and exposure of such to children, child sexual abuse. And in red states, they were even threatening to remove children from families if the child was exposed to even one person who was transgender. This is what the conservatives mean. To make matters worse, conservatives want to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which is the health care insurance program that ensures everyone will have insurance even when they're low income. See, in the States, out-of-pocket costs for healthcare are so insanely expensive that the only way people can get healthcare for major issues is through insurance companies. People pay into the insurance pool, and when they need treatment, the money is paid for by the insurance company. Right? Before the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies could turn down people with pre-existing conditions, leaving them uninsured and therefore unable to get health care. Now, the manipulators will, come on here and they'll shout, "That's not true. The ER, the emergency room, has to take them." And while it is true that emergency rooms were required to treat people even if they could not afford to pay, this is often the final stop in a chronic disease. It's for emergencies, not preventative care, right? Not for maintenance care. So, for example, if a woman feels a lump in her breast, right, and she goes to the emergency room, she's not going to be treated at the emergency room, not for that lump, as it's not an emergency yet. She will be directed to a doctor, and that requires medical insurance, since cancer treatment can be extremely expensive. It can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, well into the millions. Unless a person is filthy rich, they can't pay out of pocket. They need to go through an insurance company. If she has no medical insurance, she can't get the treatment, okay? It isn't until the cancer spreads and she gets sick, that's when she'll end up in the ER. And well, yeah, at that point, they'll treat her current symptoms. They're not going to treat the cancer, okay? In that case, she's going to die. See, that's how it works. Not to mention, before the Affordable Care Act, which is Obamacare, they are the same thing. And there were a lot of conservatives who said they voted for Trump because they wanted to get rid of Obamacare, but they said they just wanted to keep the Affordable Care Act. They didn't understand that they're the same thing. Okay? And now they're complaining that their health care is going to be taken away. Okay. So, the Affordable Care Act, right, would not, so wait, where am I? Hang on, I'm reading. So not to mention, before the Affordable Care Act, okay, Obamacare, healthcare would not be covered under normal health insurance plans and would often cost, maternal care would not be covered under normal health insurance plans, right, before Obamacare. And it would cost hundreds of extra dollars a month. And that's added to, the insurance plan, the normal plan that a woman already has, which is already going to be costing her hundreds of dollars a month, because they charged women a lot more than they did men, even though they didn't provide the services that they were charging for, right? They would say, well, women's health care costs more, but the things that cost more weren't even covered under the plans. So going back to those times, pregnancy could be financially crippling to a woman, right? If she was dirt poor, she might be able to get government assistance. But if she had an okay job and was over the poverty line, even just slightly, she would not qualify, right? But prenatal care would be so expensive under most plans, most women earning minimum wage would not be able to afford it. She would then have to quit her job, go on government assistance, because she could only go on the government assistance if she quits her job or makes so little that she can't afford a normal health care plan. Her life would be destroyed, right? Especially if she went to college, went to university, she got a degree, worked hard, got an entry-level job, was trying to work her way up, and all of a sudden it's all gone. If she gets pregnant, she can't afford the health insurance, but she earns too much to afford government assistance. Now she has to quit her job. This is the destruction that is taking place in the U.S. And that was happening before Obamacare. Okay, Trump is going to get rid of Obamacare, which is the Affordable Care Act. Okay, so imagine that rape case where, you know, a girl is raped, and then she has to pay for all of that, in addition to destroying her body, going through the pain of forced labor, and then being enslaved to him for life. They take everything. There's nothing left at that point. And it's meant to crush women. It's meant to crush girls. When conservatives claim they are going to stop sex trafficking, they do not mean they will stop young girls from being taken over state lines to have sex with older men. Especially if they perform one of their marriage ceremonies, claim a holy union, and thus claim that they're doing nothing wrong. Instead, they intend to stop families from crossing the border into free states, either to flee to get life-saving maternal care, or to flee persecution in their own state, you know, maybe to get their child gender-affirming care in another state. And by gender-affirming care, I mean if the child is LGBTQ, transgender, whatever. And by that, I don't mean surgery, okay? The conservatives lie when they claim that children are receiving sex change surgery. That's not happening. You know, they call it mutilation of children, but the only people mutilating children are the conservatives, Christo-fascists, you know. They're the ones mutilating children when they force little girls to give birth to their rapist offspring and mutilate those children from the waist down, right? Conservatives lie about the pain, destruction, and potential for death when it comes to pregnancy and birth, especially for underdeveloped girls. They trivialize it, and by doing so, they can justify not only forcing children to do it, but also taking away life-saving medical care. Because if it's trivialized, they say, well, what's the problem? It's not dangerous, and they lie, and that lie kills women and girls. Lies do kill. They go even further to deny that a child can become pregnant. So if a 9-year-old becomes pregnant, they call her a woman and claim that her body is ready, which is also a goddamn lie. And especially given how much higher the death rate is for young girls and the extreme damage done to their bodies, even if they do survive. And the worst of these sick Christo-fascists use the pubic hair test to determine whether a child is old enough to be used that way. And if you've heard that the pubic hair test, something like more than one hair, and I'm not going to repeat it. You know, I'm not even going to finish the statement, but hopefully you get the idea, right? They use that to determine whether a child has reached puberty. She could be 5, and these sick fucks will. Anyway, that is the Republican Party. They are the real pedos. Yet they accuse the LGBTQ plus community of such crimes. As always, the false Christians project and reverse. Antichrist reversals is what it is. And it's interesting how when one of these Christo-fascists wants to use a little girl's body for his own gratification, he now deems her a woman. Yet if a girl older than she is wants to make changes to her body, changes that don't benefit a man, she is deemed a child who shouldn't be allowed to make such decisions. Conservatives don't give a damn about children or babies. If they did, they wouldn't do everything in their power to make reproduction of the human species as agonizing, dangerous, and deadly as possible, and then try and force their victims to remain silent and pretend they're not in agony, you know, instead of doing something to actually ease their pain and maybe even to stop inflicting such barbaric acts on them to begin with. Changing definitions. Christo-fascists change definitions of words in order to mislead people. When they tell you about a woman who became pregnant, they could be speaking of someone who is 29, 19, or unfortunately 9. Okay, that's 9 years old. Okay? In such cases, they will not call a child because they want to minimize in the minds of the masses the youth, innocence, and smallness of the victim. Meanwhile, when it comes to a clump of cells that has no organs, no brain, no central nervous system, can't think, feel, or suffer, they call it a baby, so as to create an emotional response meant to instill empathy in people for this clump of cells without organs. In this manner, they can justify forcing a 10-year-old to give birth or die trying. because her life means nothing to them. And they would rather do that than give her a pill after she was raped to prevent pregnancy, because even the prevention of pregnancy they deem abortive. That's the sickness of these. And we said that it would lead to this, and they said no, it won't, that'll never happen. Well, here we are, and now they're justifying it. Yeah. But what is happening to women in red states now, right? This is horrible. So there have been numerous cases of pregnant women who had to be airlifted medically. Okay, they needed a medical airlift out of the red states and to blue states for emergency treatment because their own states would not allow treatment. Many of these emergencies were due to ectopic pregnancies and miscarriages. An ectopic pregnancy cannot be carried to term, will not result in a baby, and will kill the woman if it is not removed. Conservative Christians, false Christians, spread one lie after another, one of which being the falsehood stating that an ectopic can be relocated to the womb. It can't be. But legal and medical decisions are made based on these medical falsehoods told by the Christians. And these dastardly lies are killing women and girls. Yes, lies kill. And soon, those of us trying to present the truth will be totally silenced, while the lies of the false Christians will be spread worldwide. Science fact is once again wiped out of humanity's memory, as religious dogma and superstitious gobbledygook is presented as a replacement. It's the Dark Ages all over again. Conservatives keep saying that we're making this up. We're making things up. That there is a clause that allows the life of the mother to be saved if she will die. But they are lying. You know why? Because when they hear about cases like this, where women had to be airlifted to other states to receive life-saving medical care, first they deny it happened at all, and they shout fake news. Once they can no longer deny it, these Christo-fascists will shout baby killer and claim that this is no reason to kill a baby. Folks, they're talking about ectopics that will never become a baby and will kill the woman if they're left in. They're talking about miscarriages that will never be a baby, and women who have gone septic and need to have that extra tissue, that incompleted tissue that wasn't completely removed, they need to have it removed because it's going to kill them if it's left in. That's what they're talking about when they shout baby killer. So they don't allow for life-saving medical care, right? They're full of shit. They're full of shit. Because when those issues come up and you say, well, why wasn't she treated? They shout baby killer, right? So in some cases, let me see, where am I? So in some cases, they have what they call heartbeat laws. They claim that even a just fertilized egg, which they call an unborn baby, cannot be removed if it has a heartbeat. Yet some of these Christians go so far as to claim that a heartbeat can be detected at 2 weeks. So folks, listen, at 2 weeks, there isn't even a heart to beat. There are no organs yet. There's a clump of cells with no organs, okay? It's a just fertilized egg, it's a clump of cells. There's no heart. The signals they're detecting are coming from the mother, her life force, her energy, her pulse, her heart, okay? And no one can take action to save her life until that sound they're hearing stops, meaning until her own heart stops. That is the heartbeat law. And it's a death sentence for women and girls with ectopic pregnancies and with incompleted miscarriages. Okay, take a stethoscope and hold it to your stomach. You're going to hear pulses. Okay, that's your heart. Well, it's not really your heart, but it's the vibrations. Okay, it's the movement of your organs. It's the fluid through your. I mean, it's. There's nothing there, especially if you're a man. Do this if you're a man. You're not pregnant. Anyway, in other cases, the woman or girl has to be crashing and dying right in front of medical staff in order for them to be able to do something, and by then it's often too late. Which is why the maternal death rate in a certain red state has increased 56% since the abortion bans went into effect. Also not surprising is that now we hear that that the board will not investigate those deaths that took place since the ban went into effect. Similar to Georgia, where word got out about unnecessary maternal deaths due to the abortion bans, and instead of changing the laws that are leading to those deaths, the Republicans fired the committee whose job it was to record maternal deaths. Out of sight, out of mind. And that is how we know these deaths are intentional. First, they deny there will be any maternal deaths, and they call us fearmongers. Then when the deaths happen, they deny them. They say it's fake news. When they can no longer deny them, they change their stance and claim that letting a woman die is better than killing a baby. We're talking about clumps of cells that were never going to become babies because the hosts, aka women, they were inside of would die long before that. So there goes the supposed life of the mother clause. They're full of shit. Right, and then of course they fire the panel that reports on maternal death so that they can hide their intentional femicide. If no one knows what is happening behind closed doors and the victims are silenced and anyone who tries to speak on their behalf is silenced, then the torture and killing of actual human beings can continue on. And they are trying to silence all of us who speak up on this issue. Recently, a young woman, 18, who wanted a baby, she wanted this baby, was rushed to the hospital. She was about 6 months pregnant and septic. She had been to other hospitals before and they sent her home. They wouldn't treat her. Because the doctors were afraid of the abortion ban laws, they did not treat her. Both she and the baby died, right? In this case, if they treated her soon enough, she would have probably survived. And at 6 months, the baby was just barely at the cusp of viability. They could have tried to deliver early and possibly saved the baby too, though it would have been a long shot, and even if the baby survived, it would have had to be on a ventilator. But they were afraid that if they tried to do that, like if they did an emergency C-section or if they induced her early, that if the baby died anyway, they would be charged for performing an abortion, right? And either lose their license, get thrown in prison, or both. Yeah, so they did nothing, and the poor girl died in a pool of blood, breathing in pain, and the baby died. Probably in pain, as by that point it would have had a forming brain. So much for caring about life. 2 more innocent deaths due to the abortion ban. In this case, because the doctors were afraid to treat the patient just in case they failed to save the baby. So they did nothing and both died. We warned Christians that this would happen and they swore it wouldn't. Now they deny it's happening, even though it has been on the news and the families have spoken out. Imagine all the deaths that will go unheard of when we can no longer speak out. There have been cases of women who were miscarrying, bleeding out in hospital parking lots and in bathrooms after being told by the emergency staff that they weren't close enough to death for the doctors to be allowed to treat them. In that case, the doctors wanted to treat them, but the bans forbid it. And they risked imprisonment if they couldn't prove to a medical board that it was necessary. And those medical boards are being made up of Christo-fascists who have very little knowledge of female anatomy. These are people who have claimed you can relocate an ectopic. That's false. So if you're a skilled doctor, how do you prove anything to someone with that mindset? There have been cases of women who wanted to have a baby, but they were told that there was a severe defect with the fetus, and even if it survived to birth, it would not survive long after. One, the fetus didn't even have a brain. It was, part of its head was gone. I don't know. Its organs were outside of its body. Not to mention that the life of the mother would also be at risk. Those women were forced to carry and deliver anyway, at risk to their own lives, and only to watch their babies suffer and die, right? There have been women who went septic, women who nearly died, who lost their fertility because of this, right? And the people forcing this, these are the same Christo-fascists who claim to care so much about babies, right? But they will deny emergency medical care to a young girl, who anyone at this point who isn't a pedo would call a child, right? To a young girl in labor. A girl so tiny that she will be torn apart and her baby will be crushed. Full-term babies born to underdeveloped girls are often born crushed and with limbs dislocated because the young mother is so small. And the poor girls, the horror of what they have to go through. And these Christo-fascists are so sick, twisted, perverse. They force this on children, deny real medical care, right? They don't want us to tell the truth. They want all of this hidden. They want the worst of it hidden. They say, oh, it's not bad. It's not hard. Why? Because they want to be able to continue doing what they're doing. That's why they silence the victims. Because if people don't know how horrific it is, they're not going to stop it from happening. These Christo-fascists, they call natural birth a beautiful and healing thing for a rape victim to go through. Yeah, these sick fucks. And so in order to feed their sadistic God, which is what this is about, their God who demands blood, sweat, and tears from women, girls, and little girls, they call it beautiful and healing. And as they rip little girls to shreds and crush little babies. This is the perverse nature of Christo-fascists. This is what happens behind closed doors. This is what they are trying to hide, because if people knew the truth, the horror, if they could hear the cries of agony and see the blood, they would never allow this to be done. And so the silencing of anyone who speaks the truth is mandatory for the actual child abusers to be able to continue abusing. By lying and denying the severity of childbearing, by denying the dangers and the complications, they can pacify the masses into non-action. And since those who try to speak out with the truth are silenced, this torture and femicide is allowed to continue behind closed doors indefinitely. This is Christianity. Then they will chastise us for blaming on God the evil actions of humans. Yet as they are engaging in those actions, they claim that they are carrying out the will of God, and that this is exactly what God wants. The twisting and turning and running everyone in circles is characteristic of the false church, presenting itself as the Church of Christ, but in reality serving the Antichrist. As for women who had to cross state lines to receive emergency medical care so that they would not die, when the Christo-fascists Project 2025 goes into effect, or whatever else the Republicans decide to rename it to, I think they already renamed it, these abortion bans will be implemented nationwide. There will be nowhere for these women and girls to receive life-saving care. And since the Christians are getting rid of the maternal death committees, they will be able to deny that it's happening at all, right? At that point, their femicidal cronies will shout, "Prove it," to those of us who try to get the word out. But how do we prove something when the evidence has been hidden, the crimes denied, the Christians committing these crimes and then hiding the evidence, threatening to imprison people for misinformation, when in fact we are telling the truth? You see how that works? So California came up with a law that protects women from being charged with murder if their baby dies after birth. And the reason is because Republicans are forcing women and girls to give birth in situations where there will either be no baby, right, miscarriage, or it's so dangerous it's going to be a stillbirth, or the baby has, because the women are being forced to carry fetuses that are unviable, right? Some that have no organs, no brains, their organs are outside their bodies. Okay, those are not going to survive. Or the baby has little chance of surviving after birth, right? Not to mention the removal of life-saving medical care, which does increase maternal and infant deaths, even if the baby is fully formed and normal, right? Pregnancy and childbirth have always been dangerous. Modern medicine is what has saved the lives of women, girls, and babies, millions of lives saved because of medical technology that the Christians are now taking away. Okay? Christians are taking that away now. And that includes life-saving C-sections to save one or both lives. The more radical Christians are trying to take away anything that gets in the way of natural birth. This increases both maternal and infant deaths, as can be seen in red states with the massively increasing maternal infant death toll. Good doctors are afraid to do anything, even perform C-section or induce early labor to save both mother and baby, because if the baby dies anyway, the doctors could be charged with abortion, even if the deaths were foreseeable. OBGYNs, for this reason, are leaving red states since they can't do their job and help their patients. This is leaving a maternity desert. That's what people are calling it, maternity deserts, in places where child rape victims are being forced to carry and deliver, risking both their own lives and the lives of any baby if they can even be carried to term. If the parent of a child in that situation wants to take her across the border to receive life-saving medical care, that parent will be charged with trafficking of a minor. And I don't mean the child, I mean the zygote, the just fertilized egg or the fetus. The Christians would rather those children be forced to stay in red states where they will suffer agony for a crime that was committed on them, not for anything they did wrong, and potentially die. This is corporal, and if the girl dies, capital punishment of child rape victims, while the rapist will be let off the hook so as not to destroy his life. This is Christianity. Every time they say that won't happen, it does happen. And then they begin justifying it. That's after they deny it and call it fake news. So when the Republicans claim they're going to stop the trafficking of minors, what do they mean? Well, first, what don't they mean? They're not going to stop adult males from having sex with young girls or even little girls, children. No. Instead, they mean they are going to criminalize people crossing state lines to get away from persecution. So for example, the LGBTQ plus population is being persecuted. If a child of LGBT parents or an LGBT child crosses the state lines with their parents, that's going to be considered trafficking, right? They mean they're going to criminalize parents of LGBTQ children relocating to a blue state, right? Which means crossing state lines so they can get their children proper care in free states, right? States that are still free, where the government hasn't taken total control of the population from conception to death. And they mean that women and girls who are dying from pregnancy and or birth-related complications would be prevented from crossing state lines to a free state where they could have received life-saving medical care, as it will be claimed that they are trafficking an unborn baby. And this includes cases where a woman is miscarrying, bleeding out, dying, and there will never be a baby. Yes, the conservative Christians have already gone this far. And if you hear them say, no, we would never do that, watch what they say when they hear of women who successfully fled to save their lives. They call them baby killers. Right? So no, this is really happening, guys. There is no goddamn clause for the mother, life of the mother. They're lying. Because watch what happens if a woman tries to carry out that clause. Anyway, so those laws in California seek to absolve a woman or a girl from persecution if her baby dies shortly after birth. The Republicans are claiming that the law is meant to allow infanticide, and that's a filthy, vile lie. The law was meant to protect women and girls from the consequences of the Christian femicide taking place. Okay, that being forcing women, girls, and children to carry and bear offspring that have little to no chance of survival, or to give birth without medical care, which often does lead to death of one or both. That is why these laws exist. The Christians will force conception in situations where the maternal and infant death rate is drastically increased, such as forcing children to give birth. Okay, and then they will deny them proper medical care. This is why the maternal death toll increases whenever Christians take over. Remember the Catholic Church? They had those homes for unwed mothers. It was worse in Ireland, right? Where all of those girls and babies died, like thousands of them. People say there was abuse happening there, and of course there was. Like there was abuse that was that didn't even have anything to do with reproduction. Like the girls were horribly abused, but in reality, no other abuse was necessary to create all of those deaths except to take away maternal health care and let nature take its course. Okay, they did not provide proper medical care to women and girls who were sent to them, and so they had a very high maternal infant death rate, which they then hid from the public. In one case, there were remains of a child and infant found hidden in a septic tank, right? Yeah, they care so much about babies, don't they? Those homes are opening up again, and the result will be even more deaths of women, girls, and actual babies, right? They're opening up in the States, and they're already here. They've been here already for a long time. This is a strategy in war. Create a situation where there will be a lot of pregnancies, especially high risk, such as child pregnancies, and then remove healthcare, right? This alone leads to a massive death toll. And so the femicidal, genocidal monsters can torture and kill off large groups of the population, and large portions of the population, but they'll do it with plausible deniability, right? They'll say, oh, well, that wasn't the intent. We weren't intending to kill them, therefore it's not murder. They're lying. That is the intent, okay? And those who survive, right, the infants who do survive are taken by the conquerors and indoctrinated into their own culture, right? Simply by silencing the victims, ensuring they die, by denying them proper health care, and then silencing anyone who might speak on their behalf, you know, that nightmare of a home for unwed mothers, right? Quite often young girls. that was able to continue for decades. That one was in Ireland, but there are plenty here too. There are a lot of women who have stories of they were sent to those homes, and the Christians are trying to silence their stories too. But then the church is the biggest child sex trafficking human breeding farm that has ever existed. They create an environment that allows child rape to happen. They demonize women and girls, place men in total power over women and children, silence women from speaking, disregard their complaints of abuse, allow abusers to walk free on the grounds of forgiveness and not wanting to ruin his life. And when the abusers are part of clergy, they send them right back into the churches to be around children. They might change the churches though, so the abusers are then sent to a different group of kids. And of course the orphanages and foster care systems and so on are the children are abused there all the time, both girls and boys. And since no one is there to speak up for them, the abuse continues. And the sexual abuse of girls is done for a very specific reason. The church makes billions of dollars selling babies. This is the adoption industry. Babies are born to women, girls, and children who have no way of caring for them and who often die during the delivery due to the church's refusal to allow them proper medical care or anything that might relieve their pain prematurely. And that's what it's about. The Christian God wants women, girls, and little girls, children, to suffer badly. So denying them anything that might ease their pain during delivery, even if that care will prevent their death, is how the demons and human flesh of the church, they're running the church, albeit the false church. This is how they sacrifice children to their bloodthirsty God. Right? The pain, suffering, and agony of those little girls that they go through without mercy. Right? They're sacrifices to the Christian God. As for the babies, if they survive, they're taken by the church and sold to rich, white, conservative Christian families who will groom and indoctrinate them into the church. Many of those kids are also sexually abused by their adoptive families, girls and boys. And I know of a case personally. It was a friend of my mom's. That poor woman, so her kids were taken away from her, put into the church, and both of them, she had a son and a daughter, both were sexually abused. Her son ended up killing himself because he couldn't take it anymore. The daughter, she's not doing well. Anyway, the church takes kids away from loving families who they falsely claim are abusive, and they put them with abusive families that support the church in the hierarchy of the church. Okay, here's the thing. No, guys, Trump is not going to stop the sex trafficking. He is putting in absolute power the most notorious and sadistic sex traffickers that this world has ever seen, the conservative false Christian church. And I say false Christian because none of this is what Jesus said to do. The worldly church is an imposter. In fact, it is the imposter. And also, Trump's connection to Jeffrey Epstein. Trump's connections to Jeffrey Epstein are known worldwide, okay? Can we not ignore this? Right, so the agenda of conservatives is to destroy the USA. And we can see from Trump's picks for his cabinet just how true that statement is. He is choosing the least competent, the racist, the misogynist, certain men who have even been charged with abuse of women and minors, children, right? This is the creation of a kakistocracy, a government run by the least competent and most devious people. Tom Homan is Trump's new border czar. He worked for ICE in the past and has a history of separating families. Many of the children who were separated from their families have gone missing. Yeah, they haven't been found yet. Just imagine what's been happening to them. Remember those camps at the border where kids were being locked in cages? There were doctors who went there, and then they ended up speaking out about the conditions there, claiming that the kids were extremely traumatized. One doctor even said that they were told not to comfort the children and not to hug them. Okay, so what does this mean? Okay, they were told not to comfort the kids. This is part of a psyop where children are shown cruelty and they're tortured, right? And there's no one there to show them kindness or comfort. The goddamn CIA ran programs like that. Okay, that shit is meant to traumatize, to create dissociation. Even, there were experiments done to create Manchurian candidates, right? To create dissociative identity disorder. Pain, a lot of pain, suffering, trauma, with no one there to protect them and no one there to comfort them. Okay, starting from a young age. That's what creates DID, dissociative identity disorder. It can. Or a split in personalities, right? This is sick shit. Homan has also said that he will engage in mass deportation of illegals now. Right? When questioned as to whether this can be done without separating families, he said that the families can be deported together. He also says American citizens will not be deported. But, again, let us remember that conservatives change definitions and meanings. So when they say that American citizens will not be deported, they are basing that on a new definition of what it means to be an American citizen. The conservatives want to get rid of birthright citizenship, retroactive. Okay? Listen, retroactive. Okay? Birthright citizenship grants U.S. citizenship to anyone born in the United States of America, on U.S. soil, right? Getting rid of that means that children born in the States to people who entered the States illegally would lose their citizenship. Some to people who were not U.S. citizens, right, would lose their citizenship. Some Republicans even said they would deport all the way back to the grandparents. Now we are talking about U.S. citizens because they were born here, right? But if birthright citizenship is taken away and it's done retroactive, right? So too will their citizenship be taken away, and they immediately become illegal if they're here. Some conservatives have gone farther to claim that denaturalization is on the horizon. That means people who came here and were naturalized and have been living here and working here will be denaturalized and deported. Once they are no longer deemed citizens, they are then here illegally, right? And then it's illegal to shelter them. It's illegal for American citizens to shelter them, okay? So when Republicans claim that illegals will be deported, they are including people who right now are still considered legal American citizens. Okay? There are plenty of people, of actual American citizens being included in that. It's not just going to be people who are currently here illegally. On the grounds that illegals will be deported, who else is considered illegal? And here we go. Well, the LGBTQ plus community, for example, is having their very existence demonized as being pornographic. And Trump is planning on criminalizing porn or anything they deem to be pornographic. What happens to LGBTQ plus people then, right? If simply being transgender is considered pornographic and a child sees you and that is considered exposing children to porn, you're a criminal now. But it gets worse. It would be impossible to deport the millions upon millions of people that they plan on deporting. And so conservatives have purchased huge swaths of land in the South to set up as internment camps. But they're not done yet. And hang on, I'm going to stop this for a second. I have to go get something. I'll come back. Okay, I'm going to try to record this second half of the video for like the third and final time tonight. I don't know, something keeps going wrong with the camera, and then I don't know. Okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to try to do this quick. So, where did I leave off? Right, it would be impossible to deport, millions upon millions of people. So the conservatives have purchased huge swaths of land in the South, and they're going to set up internment camps, right? Okay, but it gets worse. Certain conservatives have also said that drug addicts should be sent away to wellness farms or some such to be rehabilitated. And among the drug addicts, they included people on antidepressants or medication for ADHD or other meds that people who have been diagnosed with mental illness are often on. So do you get where this is leading? That they're talking about sending people with mental illness to these camps. So let's back up, all the way back to Nazi Germany. The Jewish people were not the first to be sent off to camps under Hitler's plan to make Germany great again. Initially, the LGBTQ plus community, the mentally ill, disabled, homeless, and others who were seen as somehow polluting the Aryan race were sent to the camps. The masses were told that these were rehabilitation centers where people would be receiving health care, skills training, and so on. It was made to sound like a positive thing. Well, it wasn't until years later, when honest and brave journalists snuck cameras into the camps, that the German people and the world found out what was really happening. The healthcare that was being given was actually a horrific Frankenstein-like program of painful and deadly experiments that were performed on men, women, and children. The twin experiments were especially gruesome. The skills training came in the form of forced labor in the camps unto death. And of course, the people who couldn't be used for experiments or camps, like those who were too old, they were killed right away. Um, Millions died before the reality of those camps was brought to light. And that's the whole purpose of silencing people, okay? Especially when a government wants to silence people, or they start preaching, they start looking for different excuses to preach silence to people. There's a problem with that government. Right. So Tom Homan said that if liberal cities don't comply with federal laws, and if they refuse to hand over all of these illegals, and he used the word illegals to make it sound like liberals are sheltering criminals, or he might have actually come out and used the word criminal, I'm not sure. He one of the two. That if liberals don't comply and they shelter these quote-unquote criminals, then he will send out the military into liberal cities. Yes, he's going to use the military against U.S. citizens. Why? Because it's illegal to shelter criminals. And under the new definitions being worked into society and normalized by Republicans, a whole lot of American citizens will be deemed criminals, not because they have done anything immoral, but because the government needs scapegoats, right? Wants to fulfill the white supremacist dream of a perfect, unflawed Aryan race. That's what the puppets are trying to create. The puppets who are being used to bring all this about and subjugate all of humanity, right? Their white supremacy is being used, and to suppress anyone, and to stop anyone, to suppress anyone who might get in the way of that, right? Including political opponents. For all of these reasons, innocent people will be deemed criminals, taken off to camps, and anyone who protects them will be committing a crime. This will be the excuse used to wage war on U.S. citizens on U.S. soil, the invasion of liberal cities to remove the quote-unquote criminals that are being sheltered there. When I first started this video, I said, eventually they're going to wage war on U.S. cities, right? And they are. This is how they're going to do it. It's going to be a civil war. So if there's anyone at this point who hasn't yet seen the comparison to Nazi Germany, then you just don't want to see it, right? And that's willful ignorance. Back then, there was no internet. Now there is. And even though the truth will eventually be silenced, and at that point, all you'll have are the lies of the Christo-fascists, okay? Eventually that will happen. But right now, you still have access to the truth. You still have access to the other side, okay? If you choose to ignore that, I mean, there's really no excuse. So I can say with confidence right now that whatever you're doing right now is what you would have done back in Nazi Germany. Okay? So all of it is going to trap victims of sexual abuse with their abusers, victims of sex trafficking with their traffickers, victims of stalking with their stalkers, their handlers, and worse. We're at a point where in certain red states, they want to track women's menstrual cycles and prevent them from crossing state lines without first taking a pregnancy test. They want to send out vigilantes to hunt anyone crossing state lines who might be pregnant if there is a chance they could be seeking an abortion, which now refers even to life-saving medical care when there will never be a baby because the woman is miscarrying or ectopic. They also seek to stop anyone from crossing state lines to seek gender-affirming care. They want to allow rapists to force their victims to carry and deliver, and then to force them to share custody. They want to allow child marriages by getting rid of age of consent. Those kids will be trapped. There's no way out for them. If they even survive giving birth to their first child, they will have no money of their own, right? No rental history, no work history, no credit score. And legally, they can't even sign a document until they're 18. If they leave, they can't take the kid with. They'll have no one to care for the child. They'll have to leave the kid behind because not only can they not sign legal documents, no one can help them because if this is made law, no one's going to help them. No one can help them. Anyone who tries to help get them out of that situation will be accused of trafficking. Victims of stalking will be trapped with their stalkers, will be trapped with their stalkers in their lives. And if they are forced to bear offspring for them, those kids will be the next generation forced into the sixth psyop against humanity. No, Trump is not going to stop human trafficking. He is working for the most powerful traffickers that have ever existed. He is allowing all of this. He's going to enforce all of this. And he is planning on giving them full power over humanity. In his last term, he already elected Catholic Supreme Court justices, just enough so that now they control the Supreme Court. Soon they will control the White House again, and Congress. Right? The U.S. is over. Then there are Trump's other picks, right? RFK Jr., for example, was chosen by Trump as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He is the one who wants to send addicts to quote-unquote wellness farms. And included among addicts are people on normal medications like antidepressants. At the farms, they would grow their own organic food, a real back-to-nature theme, and there would be no computers, no cell phones, or no connection with the outside world. So the people there would be exposed only to indoctrination forced upon them by the government cronies. This would be an attempt to quote-unquote reparent them, in reality to reprogram them. That's what it really means. And then there's Kash Patel. Okay, he's a Trump loyalist and Trump's pick for FBI director. Okay, he has threatened to arrest anyone who spreads misinformation, which we know is actually, whenever they say someone is spreading misinformation, that person, they're spreading the truth. So he's going to arrest people for telling the truth under the guise of misinformation. He also, let me see. He has also threatened to go after Trump's enemies, calling them the deep state, when in fact Trump is working for the deep state. So that's how they do it. That's how they twist everything. I'm not saying that there aren't Democrats who are in on all of this, bending over for the deep state and involved in trafficking and everything bad, right, that the Republicans are doing. Of course there are Democrats involved, right? They're both sides involved. But the Christo-fascist takeover, presenting itself as the savior while bending over for the oppressors, they are the oppressors, and they're bending over for even worse. The literal architects of the deep state. I mean, these child predators who call other people child predators, these are the worst of the worst. Are we seriously deluded enough to go along with this and believe that they're our saviors? Come on. Trump is doing exactly what conquerors do when they want to destroy a nation. He is removing from key positions anyone who is intelligent, skilled, and has good intent. And he is replacing them with stupid, incompetent sycophants and cronies, people who will kiss his ass and do his bidding for him and know so little about their job and are so detached from the issues that they will destroy whatever they touch. Of course, he is working for other nations that are literally trying to destroy the United States. Okay, we know that. He's just their puppet. Okay, they're using him to destroy the U.S. And I can't prove they have anything on him, but I do believe they probably have something on him, right? They're probably using it to blackmail him, or, I'm just saying. Anyway. The Republicans deny climate change. They have proposed plans that would undermine and weaken the National Weather Service and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, thus risking the lives of the people who rely on emergency notifications of coming weather issues and also emergency preparedness, like hurricane warnings and tornado warnings and stuff. They deny science when it comes to illness, disease, reproductive issues, and so on. They deny actual risks and therefore take away anything modern that can prevent those risks. Meanwhile, they create risks that aren't there, and then use that to limit things that actually pose no risk. So, for example, they deny the actual risk in drinking raw milk and even call it healthy, right? They deny the risk in forcing underdeveloped girls to give birth. Meanwhile, they create the false notion that there is risk in anything that doesn't serve their own purpose. So they will claim that it's dangerous for women and girls to have a career, which is a lie. Okay? Some don't even want women to vote. In this manner, they lead to sickness, suffering, and death by forcing on humanity that which is dangerous, and then they make up lies to take away that which is not dangerous, right? Currently, some MAGA Republicans have started consuming raw milk because RFK Jr. believes it's good for it. He believes it's a good idea. In reality, raw milk is dangerous. It contains parasites, unhealthy bacteria, and even viruses that can be spread to humans. Right? Look up zoonotic diseases. And remember, during COVID, these are the same people who were telling American citizens that ivermectin, okay, a horse dewormer, a cattle dewormer, was a viable treatment for COVID. People died because of that. Meanwhile, they spoke out against things that actually worked, like proper hygiene, hand washing, sanitizing, and yes, wearing facial covers for protection. They refuse to fix and or maintain infrastructure, so that red states often see a failing power grid, especially during times of peak performance, such as extreme cold or heat, where the power then goes out and leaves the people to suffer the elements. There have been cases of entire towns being without water for weeks because the water system went down or there's something wrong with it. They removed restrictions from corporations, allowing them to pollute to their heart's content, so that we end up with a crisis where our food and water is contaminated. They won't fix infrastructure meant, for people in coastal areas, meant to prevent flooding. And so they end up with floods and levees breaking, and it's disastrous. Okay. The point is that the consequence of Republican policy is mass suffering and death. They claim they want to increase the birth rate, but they are lying. They want women to have more kids, they say, but then they take away maternal health care, leading to a massive maternal infant death increase, and also making childbearing agonizing again. And then, after denying women and girls proper medical care, they threaten them with prison if the baby does not survive. Then they complain when women don't want to do it. Is anyone this stupid? Like, you want someone to do something, but then you make it harder and harder to do until it becomes impossible and an unbearable burden. Okay, this is idiotic. This is brain rot. Okay, they are killing women, girls, children, and babies by taking away maternal health care, making people sick, and even killing them by allowing corporations to mass pollute, turning our air, water, and food supply into a toxic hellscape. They are denying medical fact and replacing it with fiction, taking away real medicine and replacing it with a religious dogma or quote-unquote natural cures that don't even work, which is why we see such a huge increase in deaths when they rule. They are denying the spread of disease unless acknowledging it benefits them. For example, RFK Jr. suggested that some researchers believe HIV doesn't cause AIDS, that it might be environmental, and that Dr. Fauci needed it to be a virus. And he insisted, and he instead posed the question as to whether AIDS might be caused by party drug poppers. Okay, this is false and dangerous. Imagine suggesting that AIDS might be environmental, caused by the environment, as opposed to virus related. This is where the U.S. is headed, right? Back to the Dark Ages. More people are going to die because of this actual misinformation, right? They deny viruses, bacteria, germs, or how such are actually spread, and methods to prevent the spread. They cut or even refuse funding for maintenance and repairs of necessary infrastructure, and instead of fixing what is wrong, they hide it so that no one can see the terrible consequences. They get rid of fact-based education and replace it with religious dogma. They threaten teachers and librarians with prison if they teach anything that the church does not approve of, meaning anything remotely factual, right? If they don't like it, they'll label it pornography, even if it has nothing to do with sex. If they don't like it, they'll label it abuse. Anything. Meanwhile, their actual pornography, their actual abuse, they condone as perfectly fine if it comes from Christians and benefits Christians. Instead of creating a society where suffering is addressed, they demand people pretend they're not suffering. In this manner, that which causes pain and destruction will continue, even if there are ways to stop it or at least improve it. And of course, denying abuse and demanding silence allows abusers to continue abusing indefinitely. They would rather have people suffer in silence than to take action that might actually end their suffering, or at the very least, ease it up a bit. What a sick, depraved, subhuman, monstrous thing this is. I understand there are some New Agers who also contribute to this nightmare, right? um, but they are not the ones in power, and they are not the ones who are about to take power. If they were, this would be directed at them. I have no tolerance left for the so-called naturalist communities, as these people, even those who have good intent, are being used by the government to kill off a lot of people, as that is exactly what happens when modern medicine and medical technology is taken away for a more quote-unquote natural lifestyle. Okay, and the truth be told, a lot of these back to nature enthusiasts are full of shit. It's kind of like glamping, right? They want the experience of nature without the unnecessary discomfort and pain, and so they bring an entire tent set up on, out on into the wilderness and can have the best of both worlds. Which in that case, there's nothing wrong with it, right? There's nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, it sounds fun, right? No, there's nothing wrong with that until they start lying and claiming that the natural way is the better way, and making statements that support a life without modern medicine and without modern technology and without modern convenience, and trying to push that ideology on other people when they themselves don't live that way. Because in the end, they have not experienced that. And if they ever did, they would run back to civilization and beg for whatever is needed to help ease their pain and or save their lives. In some cases, as simple as antibiotics to stop an infection, pain relief during the pulling of a tooth, the setting of a bone or childbirth, or even anesthesia during a necessary life-saving surgery. And of course, indoor climate control when it's freezing outside, or when it's so hot that eggs boil on the pavement, right? You don't realize just how much modern technology and medicine has saved our lives and kept us alive. For things that our ancestors would die from, we don't now because of modern technology. But now we're moving backwards because of the Christians and certain New Agers too. So here's the thing. People should do what they want to do with their own lives. I'm all for that, right? But be honest about it, right? There's nothing wrong with combining science and nature. It's a great idea, right? In fact, we should have both. We could have both, right? We don't need to go to one extreme or another. It doesn't have to be one or another. We don't either have to go au naturel or completely denounce all nature and just go for total, transhumanism. But be honest about it. Just do what you want. Just be honest about it, right? Don't live for a month in an air-conditioned cabin in the woods, or a cabin in the woods in a moderate climate, in the middle of autumn when the weather is okay, wearing modern clothes that protect you from the elements, where there's no real trouble, where no real trouble has yet affected you and no real illness has yet affected you, and then come back a month later and claim that everyone should live their lives, au naturel, and give up modernity, right? And modern, and that everyone should stop seeking modern medical care and simply live off the land like our ancestors. Okay, you haven't done that. You haven't, and you have no clue what that would be like long term. Okay, you take for granted modern convenience that we have today, and that you don't have to die from a throat infection because antibiotics can be pumped right into your veins, right? Idealism at this point is not just dishonest, it's deadly. But back on topic. So the Christo-fascist attempt to drag everyone back to the Dark Ages, where a whole lot of people die off, and the survivors will be few enough to totally control. Easier now that Musk, with his Neuralink, is working directly with Trump, right? Soon they'll be able to control everything about the human population, right? To read your mind, implant thoughts and feelings, even control your bodily functions. You'll be living like peasants while the rulers are living it up in their modern homes with their modern medicine and their modern technology, controlling you, the masses, like a fucking video game. And I can tell you, some of these technologies have existed for a long time. They've already been experimenting on people for a long time, decades. Okay, well, there are indeed people gullible enough to believe that all of it, is the way to make a nation great. Most are intelligent enough to know that this is not true, that this is how you destroy a nation. The puppet masters behind all of this are not stupid. The puppet masters convinced an entire group of people, typically white supremacist Christo-fascists, that if they support this movement, they will be granted power unlike anything they could ever imagine. They would be given dominance over all. Trump has stroked their collective ego, promised them conquest, and absolved them of the consequences of their actions, making this movement very appealing to them. But given how completely they are destroying civilization, it is clear they just are quite naive. They aren't bright enough to see past the ego boosting, right? The least competent of all are being used as a weapon against the most competent. The cruel against the kind, the merciless against the merciful, and they won. And to them, this is one big chest thump, right? As if they just won a sporting match. They dance around and beat their chest, and they mock and they jeer. They shout at women and girls. It's their body, it's your body, their choice, right? Knowing now that unfortunately the government is going to let them do those things to women and girls. The victory of the MAGA crowd was about power and dominance. To them, they conquered. To the liberals, the leftists, the Democrats, the humanitarians, this was about life and death. And losing the election for many will mean losing their lives, losing their families, and certainly watching the death of their nation. It's not the same. The white supremacists, usually the males, but also the females who support them, right, will then turn around and play the victim because no one will have anything to do with them, right? A white supremacist male will say, well, why can't we just get along now, right? Never mind that his victims can barely speak with his boot on their neck and his piss running down their face into their mouth. This is the level of delusion that we're dealing with. This level of delusion is the real disease. So, it's the reactions are base and primitive, so much so that they would rather watch their entire nation be destroyed just to conquer the opposing group than to back down and create a successful and thriving nation for all. They would rather burn everything to the ground and rule over the ashes than to allow others to live freely among them. They want to win, and to them it's victory. And their battle cry is MAGA. And they don't even care that the prize will be the total destruction of their nation, possibly even their own families. They won, and to the primitive, that's all that matters because that's all it was ever about. This is how the ancient Romans convinced the more barbaric tribes, right, of ancients to attack and destroy their own people, to wipe out their own culture and join Rome, right? The dominant males in the groups were promised power in the new regime. And it isn't just white men either, right? So many Hispanic Americans, especially the men, supported Trump because they thought they would share in that power. The white male supremacists let them believe that they would be included, right? And they wanted that power. They wanted to be close to it, to be accepted by it. And so they voted away their own lives when they voted away the lives of others. Now many of them face deportation. It was absolutely a red wave, and they all got caught up in it. Too bad it's now about to drown them. And it's too late to cry out for help. And even if they can manage to make a sound, there are a whole lot of people now who are not going to help because they refuse to lift a finger in defense of people who voted to destroy them personally and their families and their friends and their communities. And this is exactly what the conquerors want. They want the typical, humanitarians and liberals and people who actually care to grow so tired and to be drained so completely of empathy that they no longer lift a finger to help anyone. It makes it easier to conquer a nation when there's no longer anyone standing up in defense of those who are currently being targeted. In this case, the Latino community was used by white supremacists to add to the vote that would help white supremacists take power. Right? Now that it's done, those white supremacists no longer need support from the Latino community, and the activists who used to defend the Latino community no longer want anything to do with them after they voted to support white supremacists. This is how a successful war is waged. I mean, I've got to say, as horrific as this is, they really went all out. Wow. But here's the thing. While white male supremacy was indeed the factor that was used to drive up the votes, it is only bait. Okay, the puppet masters know damn well that their laws and decrees will not improve conditions in the U.S., especially including among whites, right? But in fact will destroy this nation and all races among it. When they tell their followers to drink raw milk, stop washing their hands, never wear face coverings, take horse dewormer for a virus, eat raw, uncooked meat, do away with all maternal health care, stop fixing and maintaining necessary infrastructure, when they get rid of science-based education and replace it with religious dogma and start banning any books that get in the way of their indoctrination of a people, they are not trying to improve the quality of those people's lives or to create a supposed superior race. They are trying to destroy them, to keep them sick, stupid, poor, desperate, and therefore easy to manipulate. They are creating a nation of slaves. And while right now, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, non-whites, like people of the BIPOC community, like blacks and Latinos, they're going to have it 1,000 times worse under this new regime than whites will, for sure. In fact, this is genocide. Like black women already have a higher maternal death risk because the care they're given is worse, right? They're not given proper care, and that's partly how the genocide is being carried out. So yes, it is going to be 1,000 times worse for people who are not white, but even for the white race, they're being reduced to savages, just barbarians, right? So that they can be ruled over by another group. This is creating a nation of slaves, right? But they're using the white race to do it, right? Based on the false notion that in the end, the result would be the supposed white civilization that they want, the supposed greatest civilization ever run by white men, where only white men have power and basic human rights, right? That's what they were promised. And to a certain extent, they might get that, but they're going to be living in shit. They're going to be living in poverty, in sickness, in disease, without education, I mean, that's what they're going to be ruling over. The puppet masters use the least competent among us to destroy us from within, while convincing them that they are actually making us great. Okay. Now here are just a few books that have been banned from certain libraries and in certain schools. 1984 by George Orwell, right? Gee, I wonder why that was banned. To Kill a Mockingbird, The Color Purple, The Bluest Eye, just to name a few. And moving forward, sorry, I had to cough. I hate doing that on when I'm recording. And moving forward, there will be fewer people speaking up, telling their life stories, because simply speaking about it will be deemed illegal. Like, for example, if a woman speaks up about sexual abuse, she will be banned from certain social media platforms on the grounds of pornography, right? If she wants to speak about what happened to her, she has to use code words or greatly tone down what was done to her to make it seem less severe than it was. The true horror of her ordeal will not be heard by others, and that's how the abusers keep abusing, and that's how a society can claim that nothing truly horrible is going on, right? Because the victims aren't allowed to speak, or if they're allowed to say anything at all, they have to tone it down. Right? That's what happens when the victims are silenced. Right? The government will say nothing bad is happening because of their laws, right? They can only say that when the people are silenced. I would suggest reading every banned book mentioned above, or at least buy them and keep copies, especially if you live outside of the US. To other targets of stalking, look, it won't be long before our books and our content will also be banned, or some of our content is left up. The conservatives will only use it to further their own agenda. All right. If they ever admit that this is happening, and some do, They will blame the innocent while giving the title of savior to the guilty, right? They will proclaim, yes, we're going to stop this from happening, and yet they will blame a scapegoat while empowering the actual psychopaths behind all of this, okay? Don't let yourself be fooled. And I understand that it gets frustrating. A lot of people, they turn to the conservatives because the liberals don't believe the stalking program is going on. Not stalking this severe, even when they're being put through it, right? We have more and more liberals saying the same thing that targets have been saying for years. But they still don't admit that the stalking program is as serious as it is. They still shout conspiracy, and it's frustrating as hell. So people turn to the conservatives who admit it's happening, but the conservatives blame a scapegoat. So that's the shit situation we're in. Right now, you still have access to information, okay? Use it before it's taken away from you too, even if you're in another country. Because at some point, we in the States will not be able to do what we're doing now and speak freely. We can be arrested for that at some point. We will be. That's what they're threatening. Under Christo-fascism, people are going to get sicker, dumber, more desperate. Okay, more will die off. The smaller population will be easier to control, and the survivors are going to be so broken that they're not going to think to lift a finger to fight back. Right? And the conquerors of this miserable existence call it good. And with the technology from Neuralink and Musk, I mean, people will be so much easier to control, won't they, if their minds can be controlled? The false Christians call good evil and evil good. They sicken in the name of healing, kill in the name of saving, torture in the name of mercy. And they project. They project, right? Remember that. They project. They reverse everything. Whatever they accuse others of, they themselves have done, are doing, or are planning on doing, right? Or some variation of that. This is the imposter church, right? This is a plague on humanity. This is Christianity. It's not that they can't use other groups. They will use all groups. They'll infiltrate all groups. And all groups have to look out for that. The left can be used too. And I'm going to make another video regarding that. Now, a note to Canada. I know there are a few of you hopefully watching from across the border. Hi. So listen, very soon, if we stay on this trajectory, you will see an increase in American citizens crossing the border into your country. They will be fleeing severe persecution, threats to their freedom, their lives, their families. They will be lied about by the US government, okay? Horrible things will be said about them. All lies. They will be from the LGBTQ plus community. There will be human rights activists and pro-democracy supporters. There will be women bleeding out and dying. I am asking you to do the research now, while it's still out there. Because if you fall for the lies of the conservatives, you will not be able to help your American friends and allies. Okay? You cannot help people if you have joined sides with their oppressors. This was a long video. I'm going to make another video addressing liberals and leftists. I'm not going to do it tonight. It's been a long day. But don't worry, if you feel bad you're a conservative, don't worry, the other side is coming. All right? Later.